reconvene.
Carrie, Heidi.
Heidi, I was
They have it-
looking at the wrong way.
Carrie.
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 Carrie, if you're ready, we'll continue. Okay. Well, thank you, Chief, on behalf of the board. That was an outstanding presentation, so.
I think we were remiss too. We didn't acknowledge Kiona, who did quite a bit of
Yes.
the work behind the scees as well,
She's
coordinating stuff. So I realized that I'm looking out there, and thank you, Kiona.
Fiona.
Thank you,
Yes.
Fiona.
I have an award for you.
Okay, with that said, we'll go ahead and move along. Next item on the agenda is our regular business meeting, public forum. John, do we have any public comment?
Yes, I have received a request to address the board from Dwight Kadar.
And is Mr. Kadar in the house?
I do not see him, sir. I did check the parking lot. I don't see him in the parking lot either.
Okay. Thank you. With that said, we'll move on. And there is no response to that. Therefore, we move on to the consent agenda. We have 5 items on the consent agenda for the approval of regular meeting minutes for December, executive session minutes for December, resolutions that update signer names on county accounts, the Chase Bank account, and the New York Community Bank account. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, do I have a second? Do we have any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Let the motion show as passed. Financial report and updates, Finance Director Gabe Boldra.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, my finance report's going to be pretty brief today. We still don't have enough statements to get the financials out to the board. So as soon as we do get the statements, we'll prepare the reports and email them to the board, and then they'll be on next month's agenda for formal adoption if legal counsel is okay with that. Perfect. And then just on a side note on kind of finance updates, we're moving forward with the conversion. I appreciate the board's confidence in us in moving forward with the full implementation plan that was presented last month. And so we are moving forward on that process. We've already got the QuickBooks conversion in full force. And so you'll see 2 different reports next month. When I do the December report, will be done through the Tyler system, but the January report will be done through QuickBooks. So there will be some different lookings in the reports, but all the same information. So I'll go over more in depth with you when we hit that point. Thank you.
Thank you. And the delay is due to the fact we moved the meeting up too soon, basically.
Correct. Yes. Yep.
Gabe, what's the status of the county's reporting? Are we still delayed on the county's reporting? Or
Yeah, the county's still been running a little bit behind on the reports. Yavapai County switched over to a new accounting system. And as you remember, a couple months ago, that delayed some of the reports. And we're still kind of, they're getting them out now, but they are still a little bit delayed. We had the same issue in Maricopa County as well when they switched to their accounting system. So it's kind of common. So.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is, Chief, your staff reports.
Thank you, board. My final chief's report. This is kind of fun. Spare you all. Jason, take notes. They like long meetings, lots of words, some pretty pictures once in a while. Board, looking at the report for the year, we ended up 4489, so about 47 calls, if I did my math right there. More calls than last year. That's not an incredible amount, but it's an increase in a few calls. Looking at some of the the backcountry rescues, definitely increased from the year before. Mutual aid's a little bit down. Everything else is, I think, kind of bouncing around. Good intent calls are up overall. Service calls are up overall. I don't know if some of that's incidents, different reporting. Some of those things can have some factors, but everything is, I think, fairly in the same range. We ended up with 633 interfacilities compared to 627. I would have guessed that number was going to be down from the year, from last year, but it's not. So that is what it is. We continue to do. We did a couple interfacilities yesterday to Phoenix, so we, it just comes and goes in those type of things. So,
Chief, if I
Yes,
could just ask
please.
a question.
yes, please.
I was curious with the community visits that is under the auspices of Chief Masulas. What category is that service call?
I don't believe we're capturing those in this report.
We capture them not in the report.
We capture them, but not in this report.
Oh,
Captured as a departmental activity and not necessarily.
If you can,
a response.
can you grab the, or use the mic at least?
They are captured as a departmental activity and not as an incident response.
thank you.
So that would be, we would be able to see that more in the annual report sort of thing? Is that where we would probably see those kind of numbers?
I would think so.
Okay.
I would think that's probably the,
Place.
I mean, we can make sure that they're in there.
Well, it might be nice to include that in future chief reports, because they are a significant service they offer.
So we certainly can, and that's no problem. Right now, I don't know that the best practice is to include them in your incident reports. We'll
Okay.
need to investigate that. I don't know for certain where that's best to be captured. So I know a guy that will look into that and get back to you. And certainly wherever that's meant to be captured, but definitely in our annual report where CRM will talk or EMS will talk. I'm not sure where that'll fall because it kind of a hybrid piece there. It'll be in one of those areas. I guess most likely in EMS, I would think. And just talking about the number of visits we had, the number of unique visitors, so the number of patients we saw, and then the number of times we saw those patients. But so that's
thank
great,
you.
great observation, and certainly easy to capture. Looking at the response times, the 90th percentile, way up this month for whatever reason, maybe some snow, maybe just the busy time, where the calls fell. I don't know if there's anything that you have specific as to why that number is as high as it is this month.
Chief Casey and I don't. Regarding, there's a question last month about if those times, I can't remember what the question was asked, but basically if they were the total reflex times or if they were just the times when the call, the times that are in that report are the total reflex times. So it includes everything from the moment that the 911 call is initiated to the person's arrival on scene. So all that is captured within that number.
So start to finish on that. Response by station, I bet that looks like that almost every month. Incidents by time of year, just kind of looking back at the year. We definitely get busy in the afternoon. And then it ramps up and ramps down pretty standard for most places, short of the Las Vegases of the world, or sometimes I believe Scottsdale's calls are a little bit different as they get their nightlife down in Old Town and stuff like that. It changes. They have a different bar graph, but ours is pretty standard for a bedroom community as ours. Community risk management, we don't have an updated report there for this month, just due to the earliness of this meeting and holiday season and everything like that. So apologize, but things are chugging along there as usual. And in the month of December, like we said, we did have some vacation time by many of the folks in CRM. We were nice enough to let them take a vacation. So that's that. Looking at the grants updates, we've got the 85 mobile radio grant, the $348,000 that we've got out there pending. I won't suspect that you'll hear something back on that until the spring or later on that. So it's just hanging out there. I don't know if the AFG, the fire prevention grant is out, open, done. I can't remember where that one's at, if we're doing anything for that one. Closed already, okay. Training information, Captain Wassel and Fire Marshal Davis have been out working to deliver the company inspection training. Actually, I just saw another email today. We had a technical glitch along the way, but we're past that, and good stuff is happening as we speak in the company inspection program. Good stuff there. We really had a great opportunity to do a mutual drill between us and the fire and the police department with an active shooter. Lots of positive feedback. Our folks were at the scene, actually, Battalion Chief Baker, Captain Lewis were there, and really worked really well with the police department and the school district. And I was at a meeting later in the day at the school district, and I was approached by 2 or 3 of the school personnel, just wanted me to know how well our guys did and how much they appreciated it and how compassionate they were for what's a difficult situation. Ironically, tomorrow we're hosting, how many, 70, 80 people tomorrow, 90 people? Over 70 people tomorrow for active shooter training here, and then we'll be at the Big Park School doing active shooter on-site training And so we're excited to host that. We've got some outside facilitators coming to that. It's a big deal. Ties into the ballistic protective equipment that you purchased and we now have in place.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please do.
Is there a possibility for any of the board members to attend that?
Certainly, if you'd like to work out with, who's the best, Mike or you, Ed? Mike, talk with, get in touch with Jason or I, what time you might come by, and we can just make arrangements to make sure whoever would like to stop by and see that, we can certainly let you see that and be part of that or whatever.
I don't want to get in the way. I'm just really
No.
interested.
Yeah, certainly, we can definitely make that happen. We launched ESO. That's our program that we bought to help us with a new patient care reporting. We launched that on January 1st. It's going very smoothly. So thank you to Division Chief Mazulis for spearheading that. But we had lots of help from Brian Espiau, Jeremy Harris, and a few others along the way. So good stuff there. And I think that's probably a good overview of our training. Donations, we got over $400 in donations this last month. The number of training hours. I lost it. Hello? So that is the chief's report for that. I think there's a few more things talking about the upcoming AFTA conference. So you will enjoy Laughlin the 17th to the 19th. Have fun. I'll miss you there, but I'll be there in spirit. I was just kidding, actually. And then we have our board workshop on February 14th. So don't forget, the staff is working on that agenda. Certainly, if you have any items that you would like to see us highlight or work on, I know we're working with legal counsel on a couple other items we want to tackle and bring forth. Please let Chief Coyle know, and he'll work and try to figure out where that fits on the agenda, or if it's appropriate or whatever that type of thing is. But please let us know about that. I think that's my fastest chief report ever. That is all, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Trying to lead by example here, people.
Okay, moving along here on the agenda, we've got our board member items. Number one, discussion possible action or staff direction for the status of the fire chief selection process and outsourcing recruitment services. And I believe that's Chief Coyle. Okay.
I won't run you over. I struggle with these mics because I can't hardly hear myself, but I think that's on, right? It's just so it's in the audio. So after the last board meeting, we conducted an outreach, developed a scope of work, and then went through an outreach process and got the information back from the different human resource firms that we contacted. And so I was just going to kind of go over this from start to finish, just to make sure that everybody on the board has a clear understanding of what the process of proposed we engage in is, and then move on to what I recommend as far as a course of action going forward. So the goal is to implement a process that best enables us to recruit the best chief. And if there's opportunities to maximize, provide secondary, tertiary benefits to organizations as far as ways to align our human resource operations with best practice, especially with current industry trends in public safety, things like that we can glean from this experience, then we'll also look for opportunities to do that as well. So, some of the key things to consider as we look at the different pieces is that the Sedona Fire District will retain project oversight. None of this process is intended to or will make it where the board gives up any of their responsibilities or any of us within the organization give up our ability to craft a product when it comes to a job analysis, a job description, and then conduct an outreach in a way that aligns with fundamentally with your expectations and with what is best practice and what we know has been effective for us in the past. It's just giving us some extra manpower and that expertise to be able to do the best job possible. We talked about tentatively having a team that would include at least myself, Heidi, and Kiona, and then a board liaison as well, so we can make sure and communicate things all the way throughout the process. And the HR firm will provide, the necessary expertise. And the one that I'll be recommending has agreed to meet with us as often as possible. It's actually in writing to make sure that the work is performed as expected, so we won't have to worry about, won't be like a lawyer where you have to worry about, the quarter-hour charges, things like that. Once we pay. Sorry, Bill, that was the only example I could think of like that.
Every 6 seconds.
Every 6 seconds. So, anyhow. So the first step is that we conduct a comprehensive job analysis. And that job analysis, so we got a lot of input from the chief in our transition. They're also going to look at different best practices within the industry and provide suggestions there. And this will be one of the first opportunities of many for the board to provide input about what they think is important. Then we'll try to normalize those expectations and come out with a process. A lot of it, too, and why that input is really valuable is that we may say things 3 or 4 different ways, and then once we get to that clear intent, like, hey, I want someone to have experience. Well, what is it that you want about experience? We want somebody that is adept at dealing with X, Y, Z. Okay, and then with those with the expertise that the HR firm provides, then we can turn that into a competency, and then we can reflect that in the job description, and we can also reflect it in the performance evaluation. So you all have a good way to be able to not only define it up front, but to measure it in the end. And so we can bring all that stuff together. And that takes some time, but it's it's the way it's done. And then the recruitment information, they'll take the lead on that as far as the distribution, identifying. And that's the main thing that they'll do for us, in addition to reaching out and knowing what all the deadlines are to make sure that we get things in print in a time that it's effective for all the different trade journals, and which ones have the most reach, which ones have had the highest degree of success in matching candidates with whatever we define as our skill set, with employers, is we'll also have a hand in that to make sure that it is, number one, better than the one that the police department put out, because theirs was really nice, their last outreach form. And number two is that it takes into the flavor of Sedona, the character of Sedona, so people understand where they're going. Because one of the biggest things when you look at downstream at performance and making sure that performance aligns with expectations, and so is just clarifying as much as you can about that intent of, let them know what the community is about, let them know, because we don't want anybody having surprises. We want to bring a lot of people, great candidates, into the fold. We want them to know exactly what they're getting. Advertise and screen for applicants. So as we move forward with the outreach, then we'll identify a database for screen for applicants. And this is the kind of stuff that it's really important that we do this right, because even the first screening of applicants counts as a test when it comes to the EEOC. So we want to make sure that we're doing all that right, and we also want to make sure that we get the best candidates possible. Ideally, we'll end up with about 30 candidates at the end of that, and then they'll, ahead of time, we'll develop this validated criteria. And so when I say validated criteria, is that there's face validations. Well, that looks good, but we'll actually validate all parts of the criteria to make sure that it is truly measuring what we say it's measuring. Because again, that increases the likelihood that you get what you really want to get as far as competencies and stuff downstream. So ideally, at the end of this, and we put up to 12, that may be something where we say, hey, we only want 8, or maybe we want 10. But the contract states that they will provide, identify up to 12 highly qualified candidates to move into the next phase. So we've gone from 30 to 12, and then we'll conduct an assessment center, and all the different parts and pieces of this assessment center are going to be predicated on what ends up in that job description, that job analysis. So if some of the things that are important to the board are that this person has is good at, whatever the attitudinal and motivational characteristics, those soft skills you like, critical thinking skills, all that, there's certain ways to test for those in a manner that can help to highlight them. So that's why that input at the beginning, it doesn't have to be all the weird words that I learned in my classes, but we just got to get them in so we can put them in there so the HR firm can then look for valid tools to test them by. And then they will administer the process. We will define the criteria that's important, based on that, get from that job analysis forward. But they will administer that process to make sure that we have, a well-run process. And again, so I know that Keona's interested, well, so am I, to learn from that on how we can improve our own internal process for captains, for battalion chiefs and everything. So, it's like training camp for me. And then they'll score the assessment, develop narrative profiles for each one of them to move forward. And so then, this will be another key place where the board will be heavily involved. Because now, all of a sudden, after we get these profiles, we're gonna take these down to 3. And then they'll, engage and as we, again, this is vague because we haven't defined the tools yet, but there's most definitely certain ways that we can engage the community in the assessments. But then also in this final part where, perhaps part of it is that they conduct a meeting with the public. And then you allow the public to be present in that meeting, and then we evaluate them based on whatever criteria it is that we're trying to evaluate for that thing, for that particular part of it. And then collect all the different inputs from, whichever way that we want to collect, whichever dimensions we're measuring in those particular parts, and then bring that together. So one thing I think is key about this is that, it's, at the end of the day, we try to take things and turn them into numbers, just so as we're comparing things across multiple dimensions, that we can kind of normalize that. But nowhere in here is just like the numbers rule the show. That if somebody all of a sudden games the system and then it comes down to the last 3, nothing about any of this is intended to or will prevent the board from making that decision on who they want to be the fire chief. I think from some of the feedback I've received from other people, I start kind of nerding out on all the different validated this, everything. It sounds sometimes like it's just, you input all these people in the end and then it pumps out, here's number 1, this is the guy you should pick, and it's certainly not like that.
Can I ask really quick?
Sure.
Is it necessary to bring the public in?
It's not necessary. No, I mean, really, the only things that are necessary is that the criteria used is validated and that we don't create a disparate impact. As far as legally, that's probably really the only thing, because other than that,
Right.
the board can just pick someone to be the fire chief. But I think it's good to give the public an opportunity to interact with the fire chief. And once you can see how that person's interacting. But there are certain ways that you can say, all right, this dimension, say if there's a dimension that has something to do with a role-playing event that involves the public, is gonna be weighted this way, and here's the criteria that you're gonna be scored on. And that's one of the things about, using another outside firm too, is they'll define that criteria clearly. And so it won't be like, you think he's a good guy on a scale of 1 to 10, or that they can go off script, and, because unstructured interviews are a really good way to kind of get yourself in trouble, but say, hey, what do you think about cutting the budget by 50%? I like that. All right, that's my guy. We won't be allowed to do that. So we can kind of allow their input, but in a manner that is consistent with good practice.
I've been here 24 years and I've just seen, whenever there's a lot of public involvement, it just seems to slow the process and muddy the waters. Not all the time, but just in certain situations. So I was just wondering if that was a really important component for what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I can certainly see how that could happen if it wasn't done well. But I think we could allow the public to have a role in this and prevent what has happened in the past. And I can think of some significant examples of that as well from happening right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Along those lines, I've already been asked by 3 different people who are decision makers in the community if they can be invited to be on some of those panels once we get down. I'm not talking about the public presentation where the whole community is invited, but more the panels where people are offering their job skills or showing off their job skills. So it is something the community seems to want to be involved with.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know that when we hired for assistant chief, we did that. There were some panels where people from the Chamber of Commerce, from people who've been on fire board before, and fire board members got to be maybe in an audience of 20 or so, and the 3 applicants came in, or maybe more, it was 3, came in, and we all got to hear what they had to say.
And that, yeah, those stakeholder groups, I personally feel like for the position of fire chief, having them engaged, and especially for y'all being able to see how they interact with those different stakeholder groups is critical.
Great.
And there is ways that can be incorporated in an assessment center, There's also ways that could be incorporated in that final part, in a way that's prevents it from having more weight than it should in the overall process, and that's what's, that'll be key.
Hey, Jason, just real quick, if I could jump in. So that stakeholder involvement from the key players, we talked about Chamber of Commerce's city manager, all those kind of people, those are business stakeholder type people, maybe a service club or two, whatever that may be. But the citizenry at large, and having an actual citizen advisory committee run this process is not where I would recommend we're at. Not because of the lack of interest of the citizens having a say or an interest in who the fire chief is, but because we have a professional organization that's really focused on providing a lot of details that are measurable and utilizing an outside firm like this, they're going to help run the show so that we don't fall any pitfalls and we don't make any mistakes. And you're absolutely right, Board Member Moore. We've had some past citizen advisory committees, all meaning well and trying to do good things. Some may want to talk about, as we're going to talk about, a price for this. Well, look, we could have done this and saved you some money. You could save us some money, and you could also cost us some money, and so it goes both ways. So I think, as the representatives of the community that we were elected to provide, you are the voice of the community. Those three people that are communicating with you, Clerk Cooperman, what do you want to hear? What do you want to see? We haven't talked about it. Maybe it comes up, but maybe there's a point where we have a survey tool that the community at large can throw their 2 cents into what they would like to see in a fire chief. 6 foot tall, blue eyes. Have we violated anything quite yet in the EEOC?
I think we have.
So, that's where we start to get really dicey quick. So we have to make sure if we do create a tool and have that community involvement, that it's safe, that we don't find ourselves getting in a situation where we get on unstable ground and it becomes very costly for us. And so, but I certainly want to not shut the public, I won't be here, but I don't think we want to shut the
Right.
public out or say, hey, thanks, we got this one. There's places in the process for them to be here. There's opportunities. But Joe's citizen may be coming in and saying, I want that one to be the fire chief, and they're going to wait in that vote, may or may not be the logical place.
Yes.
Thanks, Chief. So the final part of the whole package would be a performance appraisal incident, and so this is just kind of a list of the different ways that what we do to get there. So fundamentally, then, I've never done it. I got to believe it's as a board that having a tool that aligns with our strategic plan, aligns with the job description, and everything would probably help, because you guys, it's not like you can meet offline and discuss this stuff. So this would help to kind of normalize expectations, and it's been proven in multiple different research articles that if there's the less ambiguity of role somebody has about what they know what right looks like, the better they perform. And so when that chief understands, hey, this is what I'm being measured by, and those measurements are valid, you tend to get better performance. So it's, I think, another good reason to have an instrument included in there. So that's not very easy to read. There's 7 firms that were invited to submit. Of those, 2 advised that they were too busy with other recruitments to submit. 4 responded. See right there, the pricing on all 4 of them. Employers Council is the company that we contract with to do our HR legal advice, and frankly, they are more of the high-end people. I'm not sure to make another lawyer joke, but they are our legal counsel. I'm sorry, Bill, I'm not even that way. But that's primarily what they're made up of. So them being able to tier off other responsibilities to people in the organization, they're just going to cost more, and that's pretty much what you see there. ESCI is a large firm that came well recommended. RGS is another firm that out of California. They're actually a joint powers authority, so they're a quasi-governmental organization that specialize in public safety stuff, public safety HR stuff. And the Mercer Group is a private company that also does a lot of this work that's based out of the Phoenix area. So the things that I got to spend my weekend going through all 4 of those and comparing them across the board. And, you know, if you notice, the labor costs are pretty much the same. The travel costs, those are actual travel costs. So up to those amounts. So depending on, you know, they're not gonna just charge us $2,800 for travel. That's gonna be the receipts that they're gonna turn in. All of them are gonna bill us monthly on what they actually do. So, you know, when you take the difference in the travel costs out, it's really close. My recommendation is that we contract with RGS. Their senior HR advisor has extensive experience with public safety. He used to work as human resource for City of Scottsdale prior to going to work for this company. Has conducted multiple fire chiefs hiring processes where people are still performing well in those positions. Extensive experience with developing employee performance processes on a large scale, which is something that I'm very interested in us being able to leverage in this process for internally because I think everybody that's engaged in our annual evaluations knows that there's a lot of room to improve those and incorporate some better metrics into them. You know, he demonstrated a willingness to help us to leverage the project to increase our internal capabilities, and he's got experience defending processes against legal challenges. So I felt like that suite of things primarily made them the company that I like the best. There's a few other things I just added, but that they seem to have a better understanding of our mission and the work performed in the dialogue that I had with them and in their response. And also that their previous contract performance aligned with what I believe our expectations would be for them in our organization. You know, I think as we're talking about the cost, because you know it's basically 30 grand.
Number to go off of.
And it is expensive. I mean, but the thing that it does for us is I feel like, these are just my ideas, but that by engaging in a legitimate, well-defined process that increases organizational public confidence in whoever we select. I know internally, it most certainly will have a positive impact in that way. I believe we'll be able to attract higher quality candidates out with a more professional approach, talking to the chief and other people that have gone through it. When they see things lined out from the very beginning, when they see that announcement, everything's clearly defined, and they see that professionalism, and so it's all right. Yeah, that seems like a squared away place. Increases the likelihood that the actual and predicted performance will align, and that's the biggest. If there's one reason, that would be mine to engage in this sort of process, is that what we think we're getting is as close to what we really get as we're able to make it. And then, you know, leverage recruitment for other HR functions we talked about, and then reduce the potential for turnover, or like in the position that the city was in with the police chief, they went out, they didn't get enough qualified applicants, so they had to start the process all over again. And that would, well, I'm going to enjoy my tenure. I'll also be glad when we have this completed. If board chooses to approve this process, then we will define a project management team, the way I stated before, and we'll establish benchmarks and milestones for reporting so that you all are included, you know, that you're updated throughout, you know, as we complete different phases, and then also just periodically, just to make sure everybody's comfortable with how everything's moving forward and that get those questions answered. That is it. That is all I had to say about it, and I would welcome any questions that any of you all might have.
Very good. Well,
Questions?
first, you know, I'd like to point out what you said, that yes, there is a cost to hiring an outside firm, but a lot of benefits. But also in your board communique, you pointed out that by the fact that you are doing 2 jobs, you are going to do the acting assistant chief and still being the, and then being the acting or interim, shall we say, fire chief, we are saving a lot of money. And you put that amount in your board communique of $358,000. So the expenditure of hiring an outside firm is quite, maybe 10% of that savings.
At the high end.
Yeah, and I didn't put that number in there. The smart
Oh,
number guy
excuse
gave.
me.
So,
Oh, chief, I don't
only
want to.
because, no,
So
Gabe,
who
he's
put
the
it
number
in?
guy.
but with the salary savings, you're right. There is
I
a
want to give
significant salary
credit
savings.
to,
Yeah.
but thank you, because it's an important point.
It sure is.
The only thing I'll add to that point is given the timeline, the board's timeline, and even the whichever firm you go with, their timeline, that's only going to add to that number. So that's where we're at today. As now we transition, and that's just with Chief Coyle doing the assistant chief role. Now he's going to be doing dual roles. We're going to see that number, grow even more over that period of time. So,
That's true.
so there's plenty of funding available for this.
Okay, good. And the other thing I wanted to say is that I appreciate you looking into the 7 organizations that might do this job for us. And I just really trust your judgment about which one
I
you're
appreciate that.
recommending to us.
Thank you very much.
I concur, for sure. Yeah. I didn't mean to rhyme, sorry.
Gene, you have anything to add there?
Again, I am not the expert in this area, so it's like Ford says, if you need an expert, hire one. And so, from what you've presented, you've done a lot of work, a lot of homework, and so I depend on you
Yes, sir.
and your recommendation.
Appreciate that.
Chief Coyle, I'd like to also add that some of the points that you mentioned in your presentation, that as part of this process, that a annual evaluation very likely will come out to be part of this for whoever we select.
Yes, sir. It most certainly will.
Okay. And which takes a lot of worry out of us, because we're the ones that have to evaluate that individual, and in the past, I won't say we struggled, but we definitely have to deal with that process. This will be done for us as a result.
Yeah, and I gotta say that Mr. Whittington, when he was giving a presentation at the legal thing I had to go to, I don't even know what it's called, but
The legal thing you had to
for the, say that y'all are going to an AFTA, but he gave some examples of boards of the different ways that went. And I was like, wow, we should really work on trying to see if we can incorporate that, and the firm agreed that that's an important part, and it's a struggle for boards.
But it's something that we're just not used to doing, but although it's developed, it's a repetitive type of document. Stakeholders meeting, again, to clarify the difference between a stakeholder and a general community member is a huge difference. They have a vested interest with the stakeholder in what we do, and to be part of the process, I think, is key, versus just the general community member, although there is a place for them, I believe. And then I think the thing that I like most is that irregardless of whoever the top 3 are, if that's the number we're going to use, and regardless of the score they have, the board has the ability to pick whomever they have that gut feeling with, who is the best for the position, I think will also be key, rather than relying on just who finished number 1. I think that's kind of like what you were saying, right?
It is. So they call it organizational and personal fit. So the organizational fit thing, we'll try to drill down through all the different processes up into there, but there will certainly be a place for personal fit between that individual and the board, and that's what it takes to make the world go round. You got to have that person you can work with, and so that's why that stays with y'all.
Well, I definitely want to thank you for being as meticulous as you are in drafting the RFQ to go out to the 7. I do understand that not all 7 responded. Only 4, and of the 4, 3 were within reason.
Yes, sir. There's 7. We went out to 7. 2 advised that they were not going to respond. Just a few days before it was ended, because they had other commitments that would prevent them from being able to dedicate the time needed to our project. And then 4 responded. One of them was actually a day late, which was that high number that was up there. So it didn't. And I was just glad to see that the other 3 were close. Because then, if all of a sudden one would have been significantly lower, I'd be like, did I not explain something well? Or are the other guys? So it was just good to see that they were all within, a small percentage of each other.
Right. Great. And again, thank you, and thank you to staff
Yeah.
for all their work. I appreciate it. Unless there's any other questions, we'll move to make a motion here.
Yeah. I think it's great to move to make a motion. I do want to have a little bit longer discussion after we make the motion. How about that? About just this one piece of who we're going to award this to. I don't want to close the subject, is what I'm saying. But we can do the motion regarding this one piece.
Okay. I think
Yeah.
that's fair. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I'll need a motion made. Who would like to make the motion?
I move to select regional government services to provide fire chief recruitment services not to exceed $28,395 and authorize board chairman Soto to approve and execute the agreement on behalf of the board.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes as written. And you have a point to bring up.
Yes, and I don't know if, would you like to stay standing or?
I'd be
Or-
I'm very happy to stay
Or-
standing.
Okay, very good. Well, in regards to the qualifications that are ultimately going to be listed, I wrote Chief Coyle about some that I would like to see, and because we're limited quite a bit by open meeting laws, I don't have a way of sharing those with my fellow board members to see if there's consensus or agreement or some of your own that you might like to see. So I'd like to just name those
Certainly,
four.
I'm going to say, I'd just like to take notes.
Very good.
That's fine.
You got my letter.
I did, oh, but as far as the conversation.
Okay, very good. So the first one that I listed, and also Chief Coyle, I really appreciated your response, very much so, thank you. So the first one is, I would really strongly actually like to see this one is a residency requirement. And my argument for that is that the chief is the face of SFD and interfaces frequently with the decision makers in our community. By living in the district, the chief can be invited and say yes to impromptu invitations that build positive relationships in our community. By living in the district, that he or she, I said for the chief, can also attend many civic meetings that SFD's input may not be required, but it actually is important. And I feel that we are at a disadvantage in our district in that there's not too many firefighters who live within it. And so for that reason, I think it's even more important that our soon-to-be new chief become a living member of this community. And then the second is a master's degree. And because most of the time, a master's degree imbues a person with better reasoning skills, better problem-solving skills, better communication skills, and it also shows a certain amount of drive and desire for achievement. The third one, and this one may be one that I'm very open to letting go of, but I'd love to see a minimum of 3 years' experience as an assistant fire chief and even possibly a fire chief. And I make my case in that Sedona is a pretty desirable place to live. And our district has a phenomenal reputation, along with a stable board, and also that the salary offer, which we have not talked about yet, is likely to be above average. So these factors mean that we can aim high in required qualifications. And that I think somebody who's had at least assistant fire chief experience has learned how to interact and oversee management of admin, as well as be a fairly active person interfacing with the stakeholders in the community. And then there's one more, and I call these the intangibles that you've already referenced, Chief Coyle, and those are ones because of that a decent part of the fire chief's job is to be that person who's the face of our community and interact with the decision makers. These intangibles, which Chief Coyle tells me we can measure, are highly developed social skills, genuine friendly demeanor, outgoing nature, a respectful approach towards a wide range of people, including dissenters, and then finally political savviness. Those are the statements that, the qualifications that I'd like to see.
And if it suits the board, what I can do is now that we've got a company to work with, is we could talk about, I can provide you guys with y'all some information on what, like say when it comes to experience, what level of experience is considered kind of predictive of performance and what amount. And just some broader, some information specific to those requests, so you all have that to kind of to look at. But there's certainly ways to incorporate all of that, you know, depending on what the board decides to do. And you know, and why I completely understand the living in the district part. You know, the only question mark I have with that, which is something I can't answer, is that what will the impact be on being able to recruit people because of schools, because of whatever else? And I certainly don't know what that is, but you know, that would be kind of one of the other potential impacts at least. But I don't know.
Is there any comments that we would have amongst the board?
Just real quick, I definitely agree with the residency requirement, just because as a chief, you need to pop out to like a large fire or something, you know, right away, and if you're not living in the area, that's gonna be impossible. And as great as the chief was with everything, he was at all the meetings, he was like everywhere, sometimes that might be more difficult for someone, you know, with you know, family everywhere and this and that, so I think living here just makes it easier all around. But the fourth criteria that you had, it seems to be hard to quantify, but I agree with it. And that's really all I have to say.
Chief
was the
Coyle says
fourth.
he can.
Well, my thoughts are that living within the district, is it possible to draw a line just beyond the district for residential area?
Or expand the district?
Well, what I'm thinking about is a chief that comes here with 3 kids and a wife and what have you, and you mentioned schools, and other issues that may be important to the family, not just the chief. So I would have to give some more thought to that, frankly.
So board, if you're aware, I can't remember if I shared it with you, but the city manager of Sedona is required to live within the city. The police chief is required to live within Sedona or the village, is not allowed to live in any other incorporated city other than Sedona or an unincorporated area right around the city. I'm not advocating for or against it. I'm just gonna give you the kind of where we are. The superintendent of the schools is not required by contract to live in town, but stated strongly that he believed that's a very valuable asset in a person who's doing that. I can empathize greatly with Chief Coyle's comment about trying to make sure we don't limit the pool. So when you get to the point of making these decisions, whether it's strongly preferred, whether it's mandatory, those are some decisions you'll have to make. Ironically, in Colorado, it was a mandatory job description that I had, and then when we went to the contract, the lawyer came in and said, you can't do that. And it was in Colorado, obviously, but and they said you couldn't do it. So I don't know if the legal advice has anything that says you could or could not legally require. But in Colorado, they said, we really want you to, but legally I can't put that in your contract. So, you know, I'm a proponent of it personally, but that's immaterial to the conversation for many of the reasons of which you spoke, and many others as well. So, Bill, is there anything else legally that would preclude them from putting that language in Arizona? No. So it's an option. You'll have to decide how important that is. And, you know, as desirable as a community is, there are drawbacks for the community as well. And your desire is you want to have the best candidate. And what that means might include living in the district. That might be the best candidate, and a characteristic of living in the district, but it may not. So,
And I can certainly find them a house.
yeah. Well, I'll let the legal talk about that as well.
Just saying.
Yeah, I might add too is that regardless of which final decision you make as we get to that piece, we can also set some criteria if it suits you to say, you know, if this is our expectation, we get our initial outreach provides us, you know, nets this many interests, and if all of a sudden there's something about the way we structure it that we're falling well below that, and then we may want to just kind of identify that as a point to reassess anything we put that we think might be, you know, limiting those the interest that we're getting from folks. So there's ways to deal with that as we just down the stream.
Chief Coyle, in listening to the responses from the board members and what our discussions have been, as well as with Chief Kazian, these points, all of them to themselves, are not out of the question. I think residency is important, especially on the administrative side, because the chief's position is one that does deal with the public and the community and the stakeholders and everything else. And a lot of times, as mentioned, it is a spur of the moment. And also realize that you're not gonna be able to make all of them. And at which time, we've offered our assistance to delegate up to allow us to represent the Sedona Fire District in that capacity. Operationally, it's very rare that a fire chief is in charge of an incident.
That's right.
And when they are, it is after it is escalated to that point at which you do take command. And while you're in command, usually they're probably getting ready to de-escalate, but in the event that they are continuing to escalate, the transfer of command to a larger agency is paramount, and it's done very quickly. Chief Kazian, your command of the slide fire, what was the duration?
I was the incident commander for the entire duration, all 24 hours a day for all 10 or 11 days. I was pretty impressed. The battalion chief that was on scene, Dave Cochran, took initial incident command of that incident. He paired up with the Forest Service counterpart. I was really good at getting pizza that first night. So proximity to getting pizza was really important. But our organization truly has strong incident command responsibilities. That does not abdicate a fire chief from not having any skills or ability to step in. I have been command of a fire or two in this organization, but that didn't. I happened to be there first or whatever. It wasn't out of true necessity because all the resources were gone. We do act in the capacity of second out duty chief at times, especially on weekends or holidays and things like that. That's just what we do. We're here, but that doesn't, again, mandatory mean that, you can't have someone living in Phoenix, for instance, let's just say, if I had to pick a place and commute back and forth from here, that would not work. Drawing a line somewhere else, if you live within 30 minutes or an hour, whatever you decide that's appropriate, that's completely up to you.
In terms of at least my reasoning for why residency is important, it didn't have to do with showing up for an important event, because our BCs do that. And if it's a huge event, it gets turned over. It's really more the sense of ownership for this community. And when you're living outside of the district, like let's say in Cottonwood or Verde, which are wonderful communities, you have your ownership split. And I just would like to see that ownership all here.
I'll just clarify to one other level that's very clear for me, is when we talk about our tax rate, talk about our taxes, when, as the fire chief, ultimately make the budget, the best thing I have is I pay those taxes too. So that, to me, is one of the higher parts, is that whatever decisions we're making are going to impact me and my family as well. So that has a large amount of value to the community and to you as a board and to that person as a fire chief. Not the be-all, end-all. It's just, I think, what you were trying to say in some ways, or adding to that. So there are plenty of fire chief jobs in the state of Arizona where the fire chief does not live in the community, and they are not any less of a fire chief. Both the past two fire chiefs here, interim and chief, both live in our district, and our fire chiefs, or were fire chiefs in other neighboring towns, and provide great service to their communities without even the structure underneath that we have in place. So it's totally doable in either way. So whether we want to spend more time talking about this today or we determine that at a later date is really up to the board. If it's an absolute, your consensus, and you want to make that happen today, I guess Jason can take that and go with it, but I don't know that we need that today necessarily.
We could. I mean,
Either way.
I'd like
Yeah,
to finish
do it
my
either
points
way.
first before we
Sure.
move any further, but, and again, your ability to command a fire is not what is in question. It's the frequency in which that happens, which is very rare. So that would finish that point on residency as it relates to operations as a fire chief. You can do it, we have no doubt, but is it truly, is that really gonna happen?
It's Murphy's Law too.
Yeah.
That one time when you do have the fire or whatever, you're going to not be in town because you're at a conference, or we don't chain the fire chief to the city boundaries or the district boundaries. never to leave at all. So,
And the other issue on that is the fact that while it is running and there is a chief officer in charge of that fire, you very well may be that person still running what we have here remaining. You know,
Absolutely.
It fluctuates back and forth. So it's for, as for the board's information to ponder as we move forward on this. Education, I would agree wholeheartedly. Experience, as stated, AC above with 3 years' experience. I just want the board to understand that out there is another battalion chief who is an interim chief with experience in doing very well. Somewhere in America, there is. And we should consider if we put a limitation or a restriction on that requirement that excludes that person very well may be the one that we're looking for our community. So think about that as we move forward. You know, is that what we truly want to do? So as far as the board is
Board
concerned
Member
here.
Chairman Soto, it's a good comment. So the other part is, you know, there's ways to word this with, hey, we prefer 3 years of leadership in second in command. People call things different things. So assistant chief, division chief, deputy chief, good guy, good girl, I don't know, whatever. They have just all different names in organizations. So we got to be careful. Some battalion chiefs actually act up in that second in command role in their organization. So we got to be careful on that. And you have abilities to say, hey, I believe we do. Hey, we would like to see a person who's been above the role of battalion chief for 3 or more years as a preference. That doesn't preclude someone without that experience at least applying. And then you find the rock star that you're speaking of, highly motivated, upwardly mobile, and just hasn't had a chance to actually put his skills into play or her skills into play because there hasn't been an opening above and could come in. Some places have we could get someone from Phoenix that or a large metropolis like that, and they function differently than maybe a person who's worked in a middle-sized organization where you're all hands on deck, the cook and the bottle washer. So there's just lots of variables that I'm slightly nervous on pigeonholing too much, because you have an opportunity when you get all those applications. We're going to whittle it down to the top 30 anyway, and from the top 30 doing those interviews and everything else, those people may shine on paper when we get to the interview. They are not going to make it to the final 8 or whatever that number is going to be.
Absolutely.
But at least it puts some people in the pond, and we can figure out if that's the one. It doesn't hurt us at all. And so we don't, and if we end up with all battalion chief applicants, then we either go, wow, this is not what we wanted, we didn't hit the mark, and we go back out and we rebrand it and we do something different to get the pool that we want. We don't have to accept those candidates if we don't feel they meet our needs. So there's a lot of safeguards in place that, and that, as Jason laid out, in the next weeks and months that these things are happening, that you're going to have some injects along the way, and we'll be able to firm this up and feel more confident if there's not already a good sense of confidence already.
And then lastly, I think based on Corey's point on intangibles, and I think it will be the intangibles that separate those from the can-dos, that can't-dos when we get to that point. So all things considered, those very 4 points that you bring up are excellent points. I don't feel at this point that there's a need to make a decision one way or another, because we're not even there yet.
And I appreciate that, to allow the latitude to be able to move forward. And I think also that, you know, one of the points I want to make regarding fire chiefs too is that it's like that relevant experience part is what's going to be key about thinking about the attributes that you want. And so that as opposed to saying somebody has, you know, you may set a certain number of years of experience, but if you also think about what that means to you as far as attributes, that's going to be the really important part, because unfortunately in Arizona, you know, just saying you're a fire chief doesn't always get you the same thing. And it's and even between a municipality and a district, it's kind of like a governor or a senator. You know, a senator has their niche. I think a fire chief in a municipality has their niche. I think a fire chief in a district has a broader scope. I think it's required of them. So there's just certain ways that, as you think about those things, that maybe we can help to make it better as we move forward.
And I think that's another key point, which you didn't bring up in the list, is having district experience being a high preference. I would not say it's a mandatory,
Yes.
but having district,
Oh, yeah.
fire district experience should be a very preferred skill set, but that does not preclude an engaged municipal fire chief or battalion chief or someone who may have volunteered or done, paid on call work on, so I'm just saying there's a lot of, so drawing sharp lines on this stuff is challenging.
True.
And these folks have done this multiple times. All the ads that I'll look at have very clear similarities between them, little nuances along the way, but you end up seeing, hey, this is kind of what they're looking for here, that's what they're looking for here. Municipal fire chief's jobs look a little bit different in their announcement than fire district jobs. So I don't think we're the cart before the horse. I think it's great conversation for Jason to hear, but I want to make sure that at least there's confidence, but we haven't sealed the deal and you haven't had a voice.
I just thought it'd be helpful to get it out on the table
it is.
sooner rather than later. And I did somewhat, I do believe, among my fellow board members hear a consensus around the residency, with some concern that it might limit somebody with children, young children. But I did hear a certain a desire for that. Great.
Well, Chief Coyle, again, we truly appreciate your work, and as with the staff, continue onward, if you will, with the things that we are concerned with, as you have. And at this point, I don't think there's any need to make any kind of directive or motion further than what we've already done. Continue, we approve of what you're doing. We like the work we're seeing. So thank you for that. Okay?
So we have a motion and a second and
We've already done,
We did
because
it.
it was just for the RG, that's already been done. Okay, thank you, Chief. At this point, the last two items on our agenda, item F.
is there a vote?
What's that?
We already had it.
You voted.
We did it,
Yeah,
yeah.
we already had the motion to approve the
Take 6
company
minutes
that
off
we're
that
in.
bill.
I
RGS.
saw the motion, I just don't remember the.
I seconded it.
She
know
said-
It was
Yeah, I don't
unanimous.
see it.
There-
I don't
there-
Was this-
remember it.
was this-
Yes, there was a vote.
Okay.
There was a vote and then comment afterwards.
Okay. On the two remaining items on the agenda, I'd like to flip-flop, out of respect for the chief, because it is for him. So I'd like to move the fire marshal's safety message next, if I may. John?
Thank you, Chairman Soto. Unless you were in Oregon over New Year's Eve, you probably lived through the storm, the great storm, Sedona storm of 2018.
Wasn't that big.
But I did hear all of the stories. Our guys the 6-hour trip to the village, our guys encountered motorists that were woefully unprepared. They didn't have clothes, they didn't have other needed items, they were running out of fuel. This time of year, during the winter, you never know when these things are gonna pop up, catch you completely off guard. And living where we live with the limited number of routes in and out of town, you should always keep a blanket or a coat in the back, throw in a couple of bottles of water in the trunk and maybe a few granola bars. And when your tank gets below half, fill it up. You never know when you're gonna be stuck in a circle where no traffic is moving in either direction for many hours.
Yeah,
Just be prepared,
it's really good.
Thank you.
hypothetically.
Thank you. Finally, on our agenda, acknowledgement of the fire chief, Chris Kazian, final board meeting. And what I'd like to do is to allow the board to express their gratitude before we ask the chief for his final words. And I'll begin with Corey.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, Chief Chris Kazian, certainly I, as a long-term board member now, just coming on a month after you did, have gotten to see all you've contributed to this organization in terms of many things, your budgetary skills, interacting with the public around tax rates, inviting people to your office who are upset about their tax rates and talking to them about it in detail that allows them to go away feeling like, yeah, this looks like this is appropriate. There's many ways in which your skills have been lauded. There's one that I want to speak about because it's touched me very deeply and perhaps even improved my own abilities, and it's your stewardship of the community, actually, of the district and of the community. And, you know, I think from the moment you arrived, you really came with the attitude of what can I do? What can I do for this district and for this community? As opposed to the reverse, which sometimes has been evident in other places that I've lived. And it's been really remarkable with your generosity of your time in not only in this job, which we all know has been extensive hours you've put in, to do a lot, but also in terms of the community of helping with, nonprofits gain money for their good causes, helping citizens that are in trouble, which I've learned about from time to time from those citizens, and even with the generosity of giving money to some fairly significant amounts to like our splash park to make that a reality, and to the 9/11 memorial through your foundation, and no doubt other ways that I'm not aware of. But you've stepped up in ways that are, I believe, even above and beyond what the job description might say. And it's very admirable.
Thank you.
What she said. I, unlike Corey, I haven't been here that long, and my learning curve continues to be very steep. And Chief Kasian has always been gracious when having, and he set me back on my heels when on a couple of occasions where we were in the public, and he introduced me as his boss. Well, that was kind of hard for me, as I was a captain in a rather large fire department, what have you, and never considered the fire chief to call me the boss. But anyway, here I am on the board, and I have thoroughly enjoyed the interaction and the times that we've spent in your office, and your sage advice and teaching me what my roles are and role is, and for that, thank you. I'm going to miss you.
Thank you.
But if you have an extra bedroom there in Colorado, you might find us a knocking, what have you. My car does leak oil, so.
We'll find you a spot to park that.
Okay, very good. Anyway.
Joy?
So being on the board before, you were a chief, and then having a lot of people in my ear, you know, I chose to take a certain tack with you, which I regret in a few ways, because the very short time we've worked together, I'm like super proud of like how you handle everything. I know I sound like a teenager, but you know, everything that you've done, you're super professional, you're very knowledgeable, and I really wish you would have stayed now. I never thought I'd say that because of the comp center.
There's a list of people that are.
But I really appreciate you.
Can't believe I
I
said
do,
that.
and I appreciate all that you've done for the district, because you have done quite a bit. You've been the face of the district, and you've just stepped up to the plate and just gone way beyond, and I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joy. Well, I guess that leaves it up to me. So,
I haven't cried yet, so
Yeah.
give it a shot and close. But
no, you know what? It's been a great ride working with you, Chief. I think the thing that I appreciate most is the fact that you have the ability to make the hard decision, the decision that is not popular, and you have the ability to work with those who may not agree with you, and oftentimes that may be a member of the board, it may be legal counsel. For whatever reason, you accept that, you bounce back, and you continue driving forward. That I appreciate, and that I've looked to put in my back pocket in working with people. I'm gonna miss you.
Are you gonna cry before me or no? Sweet, I'm winning the bet right now. Woo. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really honored. Thank you, board, for your nice words. I'm truly humbled and honored. I've used that word sitting over there, I believe, 7 years ago, as I took this oath and this job as your fire chief. I can't believe I'm here almost 7 years later. I'm getting the last word in, which is something that's not like me at all. So I'm trying to do my best here. I'm gonna try to keep it brief. I got a few things I'd like to say, so bear with me. But for most of you that know me, I'm usually at a loss for words. So I'm gonna try to. I wrote some things down, so please just bear with me. It was January 2012 where I was interviewing for this job as a fire chief. So if you can frame that, I was very happy in Illinois, the suburbs of Chicago. Had a great job, great house, great family, a great place to live, raise kids. It was actually truly pretty amazing. And I told myself that when I got 20 years on the job, I would really look to do something different. I thought I'd actually become a teacher or something like that. But I had my 20 years in, and I really believe that that's a long time at a place, and I really wanted to consider my options. So I found this job in Sedona. I had never been here before, I heard of the place, I guess, but really did not. And I put my name in because I thought I lined up pretty well with what the job description was. When I read it, the district, the budget size, the people, the type of calls, all those things that I read in that job description, whether done by a third party or a citizens committee, regardless, rang true for me. And I put my name in, and crazier things have happened. They offered me a job. In March of 2012, I started. I strongly believe in challenging myself, stretching yourself into places of uncomfortableness to grow as a person, to grow as a leader. And the easiest thing for me to do would have been to stay in my job in Chicago, for myself as a leader, myself financially. Every other part of my life was to stay there. And I chose not to because I wanted to be here. And I got vivid memories of those early days. Some may say scars, some may say battle wounds. I'm going to spare many of the details, but to say that I walked into a hornet's nest would be an understatement. I'm confident that those of you that remember the guy in his prom picture would have guessed that I wouldn't last more than a year in this place. Not sure if it was for my youthfulness, my lack of experience, a bunch of other things I could probably add to that. But for whatever reasons, I persevered and forged ahead, seeing nothing but a long career at Sedona Fire. I had the opportunity to work for 15 different board members in my time in 7 years. And there were some stable boards in that process. I mean, it kind of surprised me adding up those numbers. I've had the pleasure of hiring many people that started their careers as firefighters, admin support personnel. So we ran those numbers. 66 people have been hired while I've been here. 28 people have been promoted since I've been here. Now, I don't want someone to take this notes and listen to this and find out that we hired 75 people. See, look, he was adding to the numbers. We had, 66 people hired and 75 people left in the same time period. So we're actually less people on the job here along that process. So think about that. 66 people coming in, 75 people have gone out. That's a lot of people in 7 years that we've worked through, worked with, and been part of. But some of the most satisfying parts of my job is calling someone saying, hey, you're going to get the next job as a firefighter. Hey, you're making the next captain. And that's really neat, and to be part of that is really special. It's also equally special to be part of those people's retirement speeches when they do their walkout and get to say a few nice things about the great work that they've done for our organization during their 20, 25, 30 years that they've been here. Gary Johnson was 38 years, I think, or something. So really special for a person like me to come in and get to say those words as the chief. Sometimes I forget I'm the chief too. It's like, that's right, I forget I am the chief because I work in the system and want to be part of the people. I've made countless friends in the community. I've worked to assure that Sedona Fire District's involved in every applicable aspect of our community. I've worked to represent each and every taxpayer each and every day because they deserve the best and the most efficient and effective emergency services. We have an aging population here that's diluted with international travelers coming through each and every day. We have complex terrain. We have a vast area to cover, and it's not a typical operation. So when someone comes in and tries to explain, well, I got a brother who's a firefighter in name town, any town USA, and it's 2 square miles, and they have, you know, it's completely different here. Where our hospitals are located, the way our EMS is provided, there's just so many variables. And so, very proud of the work that we do. I want to clarify something. So this kind of rears its head on occasion, and I think Board Member Cooperman talked a little bit about it, I believe. I want you to know how hard our staff and membership works each and every day in every aspect of our job. We provide emergency services, and it's something that you cannot do on the cheap. It's not something you want to see massive turnover in, and it's not something that you want to have a low morale workforce operating in. When I arrived at Sedona Fire District, our tax levy had been cut by the previous boards to a point where it was not sustainable. While I won't speculate on their motives, I can tell you that the cuts to our mill rate and our levy, with 43% reduction in our assessed value, was certainly done in a manner that was designed to not be sustainable, and it was not done with anything other than a desire to cut the taxes. In my opinion, that while we were lucky enough that we had reserves in place so we could maintain our emergency services, I was hired. Tess, I'm back. That's a sign I'm supposed to be quiet. They're doing that, but that's okay. I got 17 more pages. So in my opinion, while we were lucky that we had enough in reserves we could use to maintain our emergency services, I was hired, and the pending recall placed a new governing board that came in very focused on the services to our community and their desire to develop a plan for sustainability, 2 things I believe strongly in. And I was given the opportunity to take us over the next 7 years. Now, some of you may be property tax experts. Some of you might just pay your property taxes and never pay attention to the details. As a fire chief, I can tell you that I've spent an inordinate amount of time looking through the Sedona Fire District budget, the tax levy, and even many, many individual tax bills to try to understand and appreciate the comments and concerns that I get from citizens, board members, staff. Sometimes it makes for good fodder when some people are very vocal about the increase in their tax bills. Sometimes when you make numbers work, you can make them look as bad as you like. But you got to realize we're using a falsely lowered tax levy and tax bills where people grab that right when I started as fire chief. When you look at some of those and go back to 10 years and look at that, you will clearly see that tax bills are 5, 6, 7, 8% more over 10 years time when you look back at that retrospectively. So the fact that we had a situation occur in our history that created that, that's what the public voted for, that's what elected officials did, that was what their decision was. But as the board has come in since I've been the chief, since that recall, we were focused on sustainable services, and that costs money. As they say, you get what you pay for. I've worked tirelessly to find that sweet spot for our emergency services, but have known full well that the ability to provide those emergency response and effective emergency responders, there'd be nowhere but for our taxes to go up. And I've worked hard to make sure that we were respectful to the taxpayer, honest and true, and that they get value for their money. I don't think you can find a person that has received our services that would tell you any less than they had perfect, amazing care. We're humans. On occasion, it doesn't always go perfectly, but we were still better than the average bear on those days, I would bet. I can tell you that while the numbers and percentage are real, I said the aggregate is 5, 6, 8% over that 10-year period for most people. We've added a new fire station at that time. We brought more responders to handle the emergencies for our community. Switch. Another sign. See, that's okay. We'll just keep switching. I'm going to run out of mics.
Run out.
How am I doing on time?
Don't play them off.
We brought more responders to handle emergencies, and we reduced administrative staff. I can tell you that there have been dramatic cuts, and we've utilized best practices in many of the employees' benefits during my tenure. I share this with you because I'm proud of the work that we have done as a board, as both of our labor groups, working to do what's right to take care of our community. As far as my appreciation for the chance to work with truly incredible staff, I can't tell you how thankful I am for each and every one of them. They've impacted me in my life in so many ways. As a fire chief, I couldn't have asked for a more amazing team. They're focused on their job, their results, and providing amazing services when the bell rings. Whether it's the first responder side or the administrative side, they're truly professional in every sense of the word. I've also learned much from each and every one of them, and we've not always seen eye to eye on things. We've always had respect for one another and an ability to put our differences aside and get back to work, focusing on our mission. I know that I was given an amazing opportunity here at Sedona Fire District. In some ways, maybe I actually think I was given a chance of a lifetime. Hired under a crazy fluke of situations. They found this kid from Chicago to come out into the wildland-urban interface, and I love it, and I appreciate it. I've worked to maximize each and every day, potential each and every day, and every opportunity I have. I pride my tenure as fire chief to be marked with focusing on transparency, accountability, and sustainability. I'll have some very memorable moments in my slide tray. Well, here in Sedona, we built an award-winning fire station, the Slide Fire, which I got pizzas for. A fire at the fire station with an employee that had a significant injury. Buying new fire engines and ambulances that would better meet our needs. That little bond election we had. Some strategic planning we've done. Arbinger. The many committees I've participated in. The many fundraising events where I've either auctioned or emceed for our community. And mostly the chance to call a ton of people my friends. I even get to call some of those people that are less friendly my friends. I respect them dearly. They've taught me something, I can tell you that. I researched some small factoids about, sorry, I covered that already. So one thing I will say that is interesting, I can't tell if I'm the longest tenured fire chief. I don't know if that's actually true. Everyone says it's got to be darn close, and all my fire chief buddies that have been around forever are like, Bill, you've been around a long time. I don't remember any 7-year guys, but maybe I'll find that out. It's pretty long.
I don't know.
Shilbert was 6?
What about?
He was a deputy, then a chief, so I don't think he was chief for very long as that goes. Anyway, we can figure that out. My point is, I've been here a long time for a chief. Some folks I work with have told me that I'm their 10th or 11th chief they've worked with in their 20 or 25-year career, and I've been there for 7 of those, so that gives you some insight. It's been a long career here at Sedona Fire District, and I'm very proud of it. As I look to start a new chapter, almost done for you freaking out people. As I look to start a new chapter in my life, one where my wife and my youngest kids can all be together is very important to me. I have to give a huge shout out to my family, because if it wasn't for them and their support, I wouldn't have made it to this point in Sedona, or my career for that matter. They're very supportive. They've made many a sacrifice, far too many times. I will take the lessons I've learned, the mistakes I've made, to work to instill the best practices that I preach, and create long-term strategies for my personal and professional success. I owe that to Sedona Fire District. Sedona Fire District is clearly being left in great hands, as we got to witness tonight with Jason Coyle stepping up as the interim fire chief and presenting tonight. Really, again, affirms that we've made a good decision in giving him the reins here in a couple days. We've got a great plan to find the next fire chief. I've got complete confidence that my successor will do incredible things. We've set the table for success. A good board working hard is critical. I wish you all the success. I want nothing better than for Sedona and Sedona Fire to be nothing but exemplary. I have a heartfelt thank you to all of you who have been there for my journey, supported me in one way or another. I will be forever indebted. Don't be a stranger. I'm right off Highway 25, just off of Fort Collins, about 10 minutes. So I probably will have an extra bedroom for you. Oil on the driveway might be a problem. But please stop by if you're in the neighborhood. Come on out. I don't have a rubber stamp to turn in here. I want you to just be clearly, this is an impromptu piece that just made me think of this. I really, truly want to make sure the public is clear that this board holds me very accountable. And as Mr. McCarthy said, I hold you accountable as a board. I work to make sure you do your job and you do what you need to do. We want to be challenged as fire chiefs. I said I would never work in a place if I had that much command and authority to do whatever I wanted. That's not where I want to work. This board is not like that. You are very, very in tune with what's going on. And I think as elected officials, I cannot ask for a better group of people to work for. There's 5 good ones in Windsor in case you're watching too. But as Arizona goes, you are bar none the best. And I think our community is truly lucky to have you serving our community in the capacity you are. And you will continue to do great things. And there's no rubber stamp. So I just want to clear that up once and for all. It's not right. Please be safe. Take care of one another. Focus on our mission. Provide safe, friendly, and dedicated service each and every time the bell rings. Thank you. Good night.
I would be remiss if I didn't include Bill as someone to make a statement towards the chief. But you're limited by 1 minute.
Denied. Here's our rubber stamp.
We'll
Denied.
take it off for wine.
I will take 1 minute. Actually, I was gonna share it with you privately, but I'll do it now. On the record, I've represented a lot of districts over the years and a lot of chiefs. I've lost count, and had I known I was gonna do this publicly, I would have done the count. But I have the pleasure of knowing a lot of really, really good people over the years in this department, as well as others. I've known every fire chief you've had here. And while I don't know exactly how long they've been around, I know their qualities, good and bad. And I can honestly say around the state, I don't think I've met a better chief. I don't know how you pulled it off as young as you are, but you brought an awful lot of wisdom and skill set to the game, and you've yeah. Yeah, I'm impressed, and I just want to say thank you for giving me an opportunity to work with you. And I'm shocked that you guys got lucky here. You know, it was a terrible time that you went through when this man came to work for you. I wasn't exactly sure how it was going to turn out, but it turned out awfully well. You know, congratulations. Thank you.
Thanks, very
We're
nice.
blessed. Thank you, Bill. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is adjourned.
Tables may fall down, so be careful.
I hope you feel better.